Hello, I'm Brett Knowles from PM Squared Consulting. This YouTube takes you for a quick journey about strategic risk management, some best practices in how to execute it in your organization. We've been involved in the strategy area since the late 1980s in some of the seminal work around developing the balanced scorecard and its related concepts. Most of the key books on the balanced scorecard cite our clients as best case examples. Ultimately, we want to build some form of risk scorecard here that allows us to more strategically manage the risks and the potential for risk exposure in your organization. The traditional approach of building risk heat diagrams is a simple 5-step process. List the risks, categorize them, predict their likelihood, and then predict their impact, and plot that in a heat diagram. And although that allows you to capture it, we don't think it allows you the strategic levers to actually manage those risks. Here's the issue. When we put that heat diagram together, we discover a couple of things. One is each one of the management team actually evaluates the impact of that risk differently based on their functional area and their perception of the strategy. Secondly, it doesn't link us back to the specific strategic objectives like penetrate new markets or reduce costs, and therefore each of the risks kind of stands on its own in a different dimension. Nor does it link back to the specific processes or projects or initiatives that you manage on a day-to-day basis. So it's hard for you to know how to mitigate those risks. Fourthly, it's difficult for your organization to reassess those risks as the strategy changes. If we think of the current economic turmoil, quarter on quarter we're in different businesses, and if we can't reassess our risks around those new businesses, they're not very useful to us. And then finally, it's impossible to service the natural team that you should build together associated with any of those risks. So let's show you an idea about how to do stuff differently. What if we captured our strategy through a strategy map, identifying the specific strategic objectives and how important they are, and we could list those down the left side of our analysis. Across the top, we would then list off each of those key strategies or risks rather that you're trying to manage against. And as you normally would, we'll then document what is the likelihood of each one of those. So for the small pipe manufacturer, they might have a failure associated with the implementation of the ERP, and there's a high likelihood of it. Now, these are fictitious numbers. Next, we're now going to note the impact, but not overall. We're going to note the impact from, say, 1 to 5 against each strategic objective. So if we have a significant risk associated with a low-weighted objective, the net is this risk is less than down here where we have a high-weighted objective and an equally high risk. So we can begin to assess against each of those risk elements what its footprint looks like against the strategic objectives. Where does this take us? Well, ultimately, we can produce the same heat diagram, but with way more precision. We still have the likelihood from 1 to 5, but down the bottom, we now can chart the risk points and have a more specific representation of each of those risks. But on the scorecard, what we're here to really talk about, let's take a look. We now take the strategy map and list those objectives down the left. Then we take the analysis that we did, taking a look at each of the impacts, and note that down the next column. Then, for that particular risk element, we can then note how we're performing. Now, here we're going to use leading indicators, the leading indicators around our ERP implementation's potential failure against profitable growth and so forth. So, for example, if we take a look at, say, improving inventory management, the leading indicator might be the number of phantom bills we've produced or the accuracy of the bills and materials out there on doing inventory pulls. So those are leading indicators on whether the MRP system is producing as required. In fact, to make it a bit more visual, we can score the performance impact by taking a look at the overall performance times the weighting. So in this case, we both have a red for the impact on great service and continuous improvement, but because great service is weighted at 4, the net impact is less. So now we not only get the performance score, but now the strategic performance score. And this becomes important because not all poor performance has the same impact on your strategic risk profile. From here, we can actually net that out as we note the score times the impact times the overall weighting, we can have an aggregated score based on the strategic risk. Likewise, if we score off all of the risk elements we've identified, we can score it horizontally and understand what our risk is by strategic objective. In this way, we can have a risk scorecard that identifies all aspects of risk and puts it into a context where we can more effectively determine how we should manage this going forward. It's not difficult to do. It's a simple 5-step process. All we have to do is build that strategy map with your current strategic objectives and weightings. Then take a look at your existing processes and understand how well they're helping address those strategic imperatives and where the performance capabilities and gaps are. We then need to take a look at your current roster of projects from your budget and identify their potential for closing those gaps. We can then take a look at that risk matrix that we developed and overlay that to create our heat diagram, but also a strategic process, risk, and gap analysis to determine where your most significant strategic gaps are. Using this information, we can produce that scorecard, which will allow you to manage your business in a more strategic way. To learn more about this and other key strategy and risk deployment concepts, please join us at pm2consulting.com.